Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda. We are talking about forgiveness. Now, sometimes forgiveness means giving somebody a second chance. Colin Powell rose to become one of the top generals in the US Army and also held high political office as Secretary of State. And yet, Colin Powell, when he first joined the military, could never have dreamed that such promotion or advancement would come his way. It was, to be honest, it was impossible for an African-American soldier when he first joined the military. And he had a formative experience as a young infantry officer that he was stationed in Germany. And his captain, Captain Tom Miller, sent him to guard a 260mm atomic cannon. Truly one of the cutting-edge, state-of-the-art weapons at that stage in the Cold War. And Colin Powell describes how he was going out to guard that gun one day in a forest, and when he arrived there, he realized his sidearm, his handgun, a .45 handgun, was missing. And he knew this was a very serious thing. For a soldier to lose his gun is a very serious matter indeed. It can lead, at best, it can lead to an investigation. You can have your rank removed. You can even end up being court-martialed if you lose your weapon. And so Colin Powell was absolutely devastated, and he knew he couldn't pretend anything. He had to radio his captain, and he radioed Captain Tom Miller and told him what had happened. And Captain Miller said to him, he was silent for a minute, and then he said, "Well, just continue doing your duty. We'll talk about this when you come back to the camp tonight." Well, when Colin Powell, in fear and trepidation, arrived back at the camp that night, Captain Miller handed him his handgun. And he said, "You are really lucky that we got this back at all." He said that you must have dropped it somewhere, and it was picked up by local children. And like Colin Powell's like, what? He was, children got their hands on my gun? What? You know, the implications, the dangers involved in that is obvious. And Captain Miller said, but they only managed to fire one shot, and we heard the noise and we were able to get it back off them, and nobody was hurt, nobody was killed. And Colin Powell was absolutely devastated by this, and he took the weapon back from his captain, went back to his tent, convinced he was in a whole heap full of trouble. There he opened his gun and he realized that a shot had not been fired. All the rounds were still in the weapon. He smelled it. It hadn't been fired that day. And he realized something, that actually he had simply left his handgun behind in his tent, and the captain had gone and found it and handed it back to him, but had told him the story about the kids in order to impress upon him to be more careful and never to do it again. And Colin Powell later said that he could so easily have been investigated. He could even have been court-martialed. His career of promotion in the army could have ended that day. But his captain, Captain Tom Miller, decided to give him a second chance. You know, the Bible knows all about second chances. There was a man called John Mark. John Mark was a young man who went with Paul and Barnabas on their first missionary journey. But in Perga, in Pamphylia, he got homesick, and he went back home and left them and went back to Jerusalem. And we're told later on in Acts chapter 15 that when Paul and Barnabas were planning another missionary trip, Barnabas said, "Let's bring John Mark." And Paul said, "No way. He let us down last time. He's not coming." And in fact, Paul and Barnabas, they quarreled over this so sharply that they split and went their separate ways, and Paul began working with Silas instead of Barnabas. But you know, Barnabas was right in wanting to give John Mark a second chance, because later on, even Paul in his ministry, in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 11, Paul says that Mark is with me and he is useful to me in the ministry. And of course, Mark went on to write Mark's gospel. So the Bible knows all about second chances. If John Mark had not received a second chance from Barnabas, then we might be missing one of the wonderful 4 Gospels that we have in our Bible. Now, we must say this, that when you give somebody a second chance, the risk of giving them that second chance must never be so great as it would cause undue danger to the vulnerable. So, for example, if somebody has a history of child abuse, you don't put them back into children's ministry so that they can be tempted to do it again. But nevertheless, with that important safeguard and proviso, we as God's people need to be people that recognize that forgiveness sometimes means giving people a second chance. Colin Powell found that out. The evangelist John Mark found that out, and I know many of us have found that out as well. Look, may God bless you today, and join us again tomorrow for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda.